The sun was rising slowly over the Arizona desert, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. The military base stood quiet in the early morning, except for the sound of boots hitting the ground and distant shouting from morning drills. That day, a new recruit named Sergeant Emily Carter arrived. She was calm and silent, carrying a single bag on her shoulder and a long case that held her rifle. When Emily walked through the gates, no one paid much attention at first. She wasn't the kind of person who liked to show off. Her uniform was plain, her expression serious, and her steps steady. But when she reached the training area and opened her rifle case, every head turned. Inside wasn't the shiny, modern weapon everyone expected. It was an old, scratched-up rifle that looked like it had seen better days. The wood on the handle was faded, and the metal had marks that told stories of years of use. The other soldiers began whispering among themselves. "What is that? Did she find it in a museum?" One joked. Another laughed. "Maybe she brought her grandpa's gun." Laughter spread around the group, and soon everyone was smirking or shaking their heads. Emily heard it all, but she didn't respond. She quietly took out a soft cloth and started cleaning her old rifle, paying attention to every detail as if she was handling something precious. To everyone else, it was just a rusty old gun. But for Emily, it meant much more. It was her father's rifle, the same one he had used when he trained her years ago. Her father had been a respected marksman before he passed away, and he always told her, "A weapon is only as good as the person behind it." Those words stayed with her, and that old rifle became her way of remembering him. As the training continued, Emily's calmness seemed to bother some of the others. They couldn't understand why she didn't react to their teasing. One of the soldiers, a tall guy named Mark, walked over and said, "Hey, Sergeant, you sure that thing even fires? We can lend you a real gun if you want." His friends laughed behind him. Emily looked up and smiled politely. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I'll stick with mine." Then she went back to cleaning her weapon. That small act, her quiet confidence, made everyone even more curious. Some thought she was too proud, while others simply thought she was strange. The base was full of young soldiers who believed power came from fancy equipment, not skill. To them, Emily's old rifle looked like weakness. But to Emily, it was a test not of the weapon but of herself. Later that evening, when the day's drills were over, she went to the shooting range alone. The sun was setting, and the desert wind was cool and quiet. She placed a few targets at different distances and took a deep breath. Then she aimed her rifle and fired. The sound echoed through the empty range, and the bullet hit the center of the target perfectly. She fired again and again, each shot more precise than the last. She didn't shoot for anyone's approval. She didn't need an audience. For her, it was about rhythm, patience, and control, lessons her father had taught her long ago. She remembered how he used to say, "Shooting isn't about speed. It's about peace in your mind. The bullet follows your calm, not your anger." Every night, Emily practiced the same way, alone, steady, and focused. She didn't care what the others thought. She knew the day would come when skill would matter more than looks. The laughter around her only made her more determined. Meanwhile, her reputation at the base started to grow. Some of the other soldiers began to call her the quiet one with the antique rifle. A few respected her dedication, but most still believed she wouldn't last long. They didn't see the strength in her silence. They didn't understand that behind her calm eyes was a woman who had already faced loss, hardship, and challenge. One morning, during a routine inspection, her commanding officer stopped to look at her rifle. "Carter," he said, raising an eyebrow, "you planning to go to war with that thing?" His tone was half joking, half serious. Emily stood straight and replied, "Sir, it's served me well for years. I trust it." The officer gave a small shrug and walked away, muttering something under his breath. But Emily didn't let those words bother her. She knew that respect wasn't given easily in the military. It had to be earned. And she was ready to earn it no matter how long it took. That night, as she sat under the stars cleaning her rifle again, she thought about her father's old stories. How he had once been laughed at for using the same gun in competitions, but had ended up beating everyone with it. She smiled at the memory and whispered softly, Looks like history's repeating itself, Dad. In that moment, Emily felt peaceful. The same weapon that others mocked gave her strength. She didn't need anyone's approval. Her actions would speak louder than their laughter. She didn't know it yet, but soon the same soldiers who laughed at her old rifle would stand in silence, watching her achieve something none of them could. Her journey had just begun, and though the road ahead was tough, she carried with her the most powerful combination a soldier could have: skill, patience, and heart. The desert wind carried the sound of her last shot that night, sharp and steady, as if the old rifle itself was promising her victory. The next morning, Emily walked into the training field with the same calm face and that same old rifle hanging over her shoulder. The desert sun was bright, and the air was filled with the sound of soldiers laughing, talking, and preparing for shooting practice. Everyone looked confident with their new, shiny rifles that gleamed in the sunlight. But when Emily joined them, the laughter started again. Quiet at first, then louder as they noticed her rifle. One soldier whispered to another, "Look, she still brought that antique gun." Another said, laughing, "Maybe she doesn't know we're using real rifles here." Even their instructor, Sergeant Daniels, looked at her rifle with doubt. He sighed and said, "Carter, are you sure that old thing still works? We can issue you a new one." Emily smiled politely and replied, "No, sir, this one is perfectly fine." Her calmness surprised him. Most recruits would have been embarrassed or angry by now, but Emily just stood quietly, adjusting the strap of her rifle, checking the sight, and making sure everything was in place. Her hands moved carefully, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The laughter around her didn't seem to bother her at all. When it was time to begin shooting practice, everyone lined up at the firing range. The instructor gave commands, and one by one, the soldiers started firing at the targets in the distance. The sharp sound of gunfire filled the air. Some soldiers missed, some hit the edges of the targets, and a few hit the center. Every time someone hit a good shot, they bragged and showed off to the others. When Emily's turn came, a few soldiers stepped aside just to watch. "This will be fun," one of them said under his breath. She could hear them, but she didn't react. She took a slow breath and walked to her spot on the range. The old rifle felt heavy in her hands, but familiar, like a trusted friend. She remembered her father's words again. "Don't shoot to impress. Shoot to connect. Your mind, your heart, and your shot." She inhaled deeply, placed her finger gently on the trigger, and fired. The sound was crisp and steady, different from the others. When the dust cleared, her bullet had hit near the center of the target. It wasn't perfect, but it was strong. The group went quiet for a moment. Then someone said, "Lucky shot." Emily didn't answer. She adjusted her stance and fired again. Another hit, closer to the center this time. By her third shot, everyone stopped laughing. The instructor lowered his clipboard slightly, watching her carefully. She wasn't missing. Every shot was consistent, every movement controlled. Her focus was sharp, her breathing matched each trigger pull perfectly. She wasn't fast, but she was steady. After she finished her round, Sergeant Daniels called out her score, higher than most of the others. Still, no one clapped. A few soldiers looked at each other, unsure of what to say. The same people who had mocked her now had no jokes left. But instead of feeling proud or wanting to prove anything, Emily just nodded quietly, collected her shell casings, and stepped aside. When training ended for the day, the soldiers gathered under the shade of a tent, talking about the session. Some of them still made small comments about her rifle. "Maybe she just got lucky today," one said. "Old guns can shoot well sometimes." Another shrugged. "Let's see how she does next time. Bet it was just beginner's luck." Emily sat at the edge, cleaning her rifle again with slow, careful movements. The same way her father used to clean it, with patience and love. Every time she wiped the barrel, she remembered the days when she was young, practicing with her father in the open fields. He would stand behind her and say, "You don't need the newest gun, Emily. You need to trust your hands." That memory made her smile. Her father had always believed in her when no one else did. And now, even though he wasn't there, She could feel his presence in every shot she fired. The old rifle wasn't just a piece of metal. It carried the spirit of the man who taught her everything about strength, calmness, and focus. Later that night, when most of the soldiers were relaxing and laughing in the canteen, Emily stayed at the range again. The moonlight shone softly over the desert, and she practiced quietly, one shot at a time. She didn't need applause. She only needed improvement. The sound of her rifle echoed in the still air, and each shot landed closer and closer to the center. A few soldiers walking by saw her and stopped for a moment. They didn't say anything, but deep down, they were starting to realize that Emily was different. Her silence was her strength. She didn't talk big or try to show off. She let her results speak for her. Over the next few days, more soldiers began to notice her routine. She woke up early, trained longer than anyone else, and treated her old rifle like it was something alive. Even Sergeant Daniels started to respect her discipline, though he didn't admit it out loud. Still, not everyone changed their opinion. Some continued to mock her quietly, thinking her success wouldn't last long. They didn't know that Emily had faced much worse in her life: loss, failure, and doubt, and had overcome them all. Words couldn't shake her. Laughter couldn't stop her. Every evening, when she cleaned her rifle, she whispered softly, "We'll show them one day." Her voice was steady, filled with quiet confidence. The wind carried her words away into the night. What no one realized was that the same rifle they made fun of was about to make history in that camp. The same woman they laughed at would soon stand on the shooting range, showing them what true skill looked like. And when that day came, all the jokes, all the laughter would disappear, replaced by awe, respect, and silence. But for now, Emily kept her calm smile, her father's lessons, and her old rifle, the three things that would soon turn every doubt into admiration. A week later, something exciting was announced at the base. The commander gathered all the soldiers in the training ground and said in a strong voice, "Listen up, everyone. Next week we'll be holding a marksmanship competition. The best shooter will represent our base at the National Military Challenge." The air was filled with excitement. Soldiers began whispering and cheering. It was the kind of challenge everyone wanted to win, not just for pride, but for respect. Every soldier began talking about their chances. Some were confident, some nervous, but all wanted to prove themselves. Among them stood Sergeant Emily Carter, quiet as always, listening carefully. The moment she heard the announcement, she looked down at her old rifle and smiled softly. She knew this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, not to show off, but to show that true skill doesn't need modern tools. When the meeting ended, a few soldiers surrounded Emily. "Hey Carter," one said with a smirk, "you joining too? Or is your museum piece gonna sit this one out?" Another added, laughing, "If you do join, make sure it doesn't break halfway through." The group burst into laughter. Emily looked up, her expression calm but confident. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll be there." The laughter stopped for a moment. Her tone wasn't angry or defensive. It was quiet but strong, the kind of voice that made people listen. Still, they didn't take her seriously. As she walked away, one of them whispered, "She's going to embarrass herself." Over the next few days, the base turned into a storm of training. Everyone was practicing hard, trying to improve their aim, speed, and accuracy. Soldiers spent hours adjusting their rifles, cleaning them, and testing different scopes. Some bragged about their new weapons and advanced attachments. The air was filled with competition and pride. Emily trained too, but in her own way. She didn't stay with the crowd. Every evening, when the sun began to set, she walked alone to the quiet edge of the desert, her private training ground. The golden light of sunset touched her face as she set up simple wooden targets. She didn't have fancy gear or assistance. It was just her rifle, and the sound of the wind. Before taking her first shot, she always closed her eyes for a few seconds, breathing slowly, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat. She remembered her father's words echoing in her mind. "Don't rush. Let the world go silent before you pull the trigger." And then bang! The bullet hit the target, clean and sharp. She checked her aim. adjusted a few things, and shot again. Each evening she fired dozens of rounds, improving a little every time. She studied how the wind moved the sand, how her breathing affected her accuracy, and how steady her hands could stay under pressure. While others trained loudly with competition in mind, Emily trained quietly with purpose. She didn't care about trophies or attention. She wanted to prove a point, that true mastery comes from dedication, not equipment. Back at the base, the other soldiers continued to gossip. "I saw her training alone again," one said. "She's wasting her time." Another laughed. "Yeah, maybe she's talking to that old rifle of hers." But behind their jokes, some of them were starting to feel uneasy. No one trained as long or as seriously as she did. A few days later, during a group training session, one of the soldiers tried to test her. "Hey Carter," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "Why don't you show us how good that thing really is? Let's see if it even fires straight." Everyone turned to watch. Emily didn't hesitate. She walked to the range, took her position, and fired 3 quick shots. The bullets landed so close to the center of the target that even the instructor raised his eyebrows. "Nice shooting," Sergeant Daniels said in surprise. "Didn't expect that." Emily simply nodded. "Thank you, sir." The crowd went quiet. They didn't laugh this time, but they still couldn't bring themselves to admit she was good. Pride is a powerful thing, and no one liked to be proven wrong. Later that night, as she cleaned her rifle under the dim light of her tent, she thought about what the competition meant. She wasn't nervous, she was ready. Her father had always told her that challenges reveal who you really are. "When people doubt you, that's when you show them your truth," he used to say. She whispered to herself, "This time, Dad, I'll make you proud." The night before the competition, the whole base buzzed with excitement. Some soldiers polished their rifles until they shined like mirrors. Others checked their scopes and discussed strategies. But Emily sat quietly near her cot, cleaning her rifle one last time. Each motion was slow, careful, and filled with meaning. She wasn't just preparing a weapon, she was preparing her heart. The next morning came quickly. The sun rose bright and harsh over the desert as soldiers gathered at the range. There were rows of shiny new rifles lined up, but in the middle of them, Emily's old wooden rifle looked completely out of place. Yet, in her hands, it looked like it belonged. As the competition began, her fellow soldiers were laughing, joking, and showing off. But Emily was focused. Her eyes scanned the targets in the distance, calm and steady. She wasn't thinking about winning. She was thinking about precision, patience, and purpose. The 3 things her father had taught her long ago. When her name was called, she stepped forward with quiet confidence. A few soldiers whispered, "This should be good." But deep down, something in her composure made even the loudest ones fall silent. Emily took her position, the sun reflecting off the sand, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. Her heart was steady, her grip was firm, and her mind was clear. She whispered under her breath, "Let's do this." No one knew it yet, but that simple moment, the calm before her first shot, would be the start of something unforgettable. Soon, the same people who mocked her old rifle would stand frozen in disbelief as she showed them what true skill looked like. The days leading up to the big shooting competition were filled with excitement across the entire base. Everywhere you looked, soldiers were practicing, cleaning their weapons, or talking about their chances of winning. The shooting range was always crowded, filled with the loud echo of gunfire and laughter. Everyone wanted to prove they were the best shooter in the unit. But away from all the noise and pride, there was Sergeant Emily Carter, who trained differently. She didn't join the loud groups or show off her skills. Instead, she waited until evening, when the sun started to sink behind the desert hills and the golden light spread across the sand. That's when she went to the quiet range, far from everyone else, carrying her old rifle and a small box of bullets. She trained alone in the silence of the desert, where even the wind seemed to respect her focus. Her steps were soft, her breathing calm. Every motion she made showed patience and care. The way she placed her rifle, checked the barrel, and adjusted her stance. It wasn't just training for her. It was almost a ritual. Before she fired her first shot, she always stood still, closed her eyes, and took a slow, deep breath. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Your breath controls your bullet, Emily. Calm your breath, and the bullet will listen." Those words guided her every night. She opened her eyes, focused on the target far away, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot was clean, smooth, and perfectly timed. The bullet struck the target near the center. She smiled softly, not out of pride, but out of peace. Then she reloaded and did it again. Each time, her hands moved with more confidence, her breathing grew steadier, and her aim became sharper. Emily's old rifle didn't have fancy attachments or scopes like the others' weapons. It was simple and heavy, but she knew every part of it by heart. Every scratch, every mark. It was like an extension of her own body. She had learned to read the rifle's small reactions, the way it kicked back after a shot, the sound it made when she loaded a bullet. It wasn't a tool to her. It was a partner. Meanwhile, during the day, the other soldiers kept practicing too. But most of them focused on competition rather than skill. They competed with each other for attention, bragging about how many targets they could hit. They laughed, they joked, and they sometimes made fun of Emily again. "She's out there every night with that old gun," one said. "Maybe she's trying to talk to it." Everyone laughed again, but a few soldiers had started to notice something. Her focus never broke. Sergeant Daniels, the training officer, had also been quietly observing Emily. He noticed how early she woke up, how long she practiced, and how precise her movements were. He had trained many shooters in his career, but something about Emily's discipline felt different. She didn't waste a single moment, and she never showed off. Daniels began to think there was more to her than met the eye. One evening, while Emily was training alone, he decided to watch from a distance. He didn't say anything, just stood quietly, watching her work. The way she aimed, the way she controlled her breathing, it reminded him of professional snipers he had trained years ago. When she fired, the bullet hit the target dead center. Then another, and another. Not once did she miss. Daniels smiled slightly and whispered to himself, "They have no idea who they're dealing with." Then he quietly walked away without disturbing her. Emily didn't know he was there. She just kept training, focused only on improving herself. Sometimes she would talk softly to her father in her mind, telling him about her day. "You'd laugh if you saw me now," she whispered one night, looking at the stars. "They think this old rifle is useless. But you and I both know better." The wind blew softly, as if answering her. Her body grew stronger each day, and her aim became even sharper. She learned to read the smallest signs, the direction of the wind, the weight of the air, the temperature that affected her shot. Her training wasn't just physical, it was mental. She was teaching herself patience, focus, and confidence. While others depended on technology, Emily depended on instinct. She trusted her eyes, her hands, and the lessons her father had taught her years ago. That connection between her and her rifle gave her an edge no one else could see. One night, as she packed up to leave the range, another soldier named Leah approached her quietly. Leah had been one of the few who didn't laugh at her. "You train more than anyone here," Leah said softly. "Don't you ever get tired?" Emily smiled and shook her head. "No," she replied. "I don't train to win. I train to be ready." Leah looked at her for a moment, realizing she meant every word. "Well," she said, "I hope they're ready for you, because you're going to surprise everyone." Emily only smiled again and walked away into the night. The desert was cold, but her heart was warm with determination. By the end of the week, whispers had started spreading around the base. Some soldiers began saying, "She's good, really good." Others still refused to believe it. But everyone was curious now. The woman with the old rifle was no longer just a joke. She was a mystery. As the final day of training ended, the competition was only one sunrise away. The camp was buzzing with excitement, but Emily felt calm. She sat in her tent, cleaning her rifle carefully under the dim lamp. Every move was gentle, full of respect. When she finished, she held the rifle close and said softly, "Tomorrow, it's just you and me." Outside, the desert was quiet, and the moon shone bright. Emily lay down to rest, her heart steady and her mind clear. She didn't dream of victory or applause, only of her father's proud smile. She was ready, and though no one else believed it yet, the next day would change everything. The woman they laughed at was about to show them what real skill looked like. The day of the big competition finally arrived. The sun rose early, spreading its golden light across the wide desert training ground. Soldiers were already awake, busy checking their weapons, adjusting their scopes, and talking excitedly. The air was filled with tension, laughter, and confidence. Everyone wanted to win, but in the middle of all the noise stood Sergeant Emily Carter, calm and quiet, holding her old, worn-out rifle. While others cleaned their shiny weapons one last time, she just wiped the dust off her old gun and smiled softly. Her rifle wasn't pretty, but it was trusted, and that mattered more than looks. When she walked toward the firing range, some soldiers noticed her and began whispering again. "Can you believe she's actually competing?" one said. "That old thing will fall apart halfway through," another joked. But this time, their laughter sounded a little nervous. They had seen her train quietly, and deep down, they knew she wasn't like everyone else. The commander stepped forward and called out, "Listen up! Today we'll see who the best shooter on this base really is. Accuracy and consistency are what count. No excuses." The soldiers lined up, standing tall, their rifles ready. The targets were set at different distances, some close, some far, and one at nearly 1,000 meters away. When the whistle blew, the first round began. Each soldier took their position. The sound of gunfire filled the air, sharp and thunderous. One after another, bullets flew toward the targets. Dust rose, casings hit the ground, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. The commander and his assistants walked behind the line, noting down scores. Emily waited patiently for her turn. She didn't rush. When her name was called, she stepped forward, her boots crunching softly on the sand. She positioned herself carefully, set her rifle down, and took a deep breath. Around her, some soldiers smirked, expecting her to fail. She looked at the target, far but not impossible. Her heartbeat was calm. She inhaled slowly, remembering her father's voice in her mind. "Trust your eyes, Emily. The rifle listens to your heart." She exhaled, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound echoed across the range. For a moment, silence followed. Then the spotter shouted, "Hit! Near center." A few heads turned. Emily didn't smile. She just reloaded and fired again. Bang! Hit again. By the third shot, the laughter had stopped completely. Soldiers who had mocked her were now watching in silence. Each shot landed close to the bullseye. Her old rifle, the one they had all called useless, was performing better than most of their brand new ones. As the round ended, Sergeant Daniels checked the score sheet. Emily's name was near the top. He raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "Not bad, Carter," he said. She just nodded politely. "Thank you, sir." The competition continued with more challenging rounds, targets further away, stronger wind, and smaller circles. One by one, many soldiers started missing their marks. Their hands trembled, their breathing faltered, and frustration showed on their faces. But Emily stayed calm. Every time she stepped up, she followed the same routine. Breathe, aim, fire. Her movements were steady, her timing perfect. Even when the wind picked up and dust blew across the range, she adjusted her aim slightly, trusting her instincts. By the third round, people began to notice something incredible. Emily hadn't missed a single target. Her shots weren't just good. They were almost perfect. The old rifle that had once been a joke was now a thing of admiration. Whispers spread through the crowd. "She's unbelievable. How is she doing that? That old rifle shouldn't even be that accurate." Even the commander leaned toward Daniels and said, "That's some serious skill. She's outperforming almost everyone." Daniels nodded, hiding a proud smile. "Told you she wasn't ordinary." As the competition went on, the gap between Emily and the others grew wider. Her focus never broke, even when others tried to distract her. A few soldiers tried to shake her confidence by firing loudly beside her or muttering under their breath, but she didn't even flinch. It was as if she couldn't hear them at all. Her world was just her rifle, her target, and the wind that carried her bullet. During a short break, one of the soldiers approached her hesitantly. "Carter," he said, "how do you shoot so calmly? I can barely keep my hands still." She looked at him kindly and replied, "It's not about keeping your hands still. It's about keeping your mind still." Her words stayed with him long after she walked away. By the time the final round was announced, everyone knew the competition was down to two people: Emily and a senior sergeant named Blake, one of the base's most experienced shooters. Blake was confident, skilled, and well-respected. He had the latest rifle with a high-end scope and custom grip. The atmosphere grew tense as the final challenge began. The target was placed far away, the longest distance yet. Even small movements could cause a miss. Blake went first. He took his time, adjusted his scope, and fired. His shot landed close to the center. Everyone clapped. "Good shot!" someone shouted. Then it was Emily's turn. She stepped forward, the sun hot on her face, the wind whispering softly across the sand. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her. She kneeled, adjusted her old rifle, and aimed. For a few seconds there was no sound. She inhaled deeply and whispered to herself, "For you, Dad." Then she pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound echoed loudly. When the dust cleared, the spotter looked through his binoculars and froze. His mouth dropped open before he shouted, "Bullseye! Perfect center." The crowd erupted in shock. Blake himself looked stunned. Even the commander clapped slowly, shaking his head in disbelief. Emily had just hit a shot so perfect that it seemed impossible, with an old rifle everyone had mocked. She stood up quietly, her expression calm. She didn't smile or boast. She simply nodded, unloaded her rifle, and walked back to her place. Inside, her heart was full, not of pride, but of peace. She had done what she came to do. The whispers had turned into respect now. No one laughed anymore. They all knew what they had just witnessed. Real skill, pure focus, and unshakable confidence. That day, Emily Carter didn't just outshoot the entire unit. She taught them something much greater. That true strength doesn't come from the weapon in your hands. It comes from the courage and discipline in your heart. The sun had already begun to set when the final results were announced. The sky turned orange and gold, and a gentle wind carried the sound of the soldiers' voices across the field. Everyone gathered around the scoreboard, anxious to see who had won. The names were listed from lowest to highest, and as the officers pinned the final sheet, a hush fell over the crowd. At the very top of the list, written in bold letters, was Sergeant Emily Carter, first place. For a few seconds, no one said a word. It was as if time had stopped. Then a wave of whispers spread through the crowd, growing louder and louder until it turned into applause. The same soldiers who had mocked her just days ago were now cheering for her. Some clapped, others nodded with respect, and a few even smiled at her with genuine admiration. Emily stood quietly, her old rifle resting on her shoulder. She didn't expect applause or praise. All she wanted was to prove, to herself more than anyone, that skill mattered more than fancy equipment. But the moment still felt unreal. The commander stepped forward, holding a small metal box. "Sergeant Carter," he called out, his voice firm but proud. "Step forward." She obeyed, walking through the crowd that parted to make way for her. Every step she took echoed with pride and humility. When she reached the front, the commander opened the box and took out a golden marksmanship medal. "This," he said, "is awarded to the most accurate shooter of this division. Today, that's you." The applause grew louder. Emily saluted respectfully as the commander pinned the medal to her uniform. "I've been in the army for 25 years, the commander continued, "and I've seen a lot of shooters, but I've rarely seen someone shoot with such calm, such precision, and such heart. You reminded us all that real strength doesn't come from what's new. It comes from what's true." Emily smiled faintly and replied, "Thank you, sir. I just did what I was trained to do." The commander chuckled. "You did more than that, Carter. You've inspired every soldier here." As she stepped back, the soldiers around her began to congratulate her one by one. Some who had laughed at her before now looked embarrassed, their pride replaced by respect. One young soldier said softly, "I'm sorry for what I said about your rifle. You really showed us what experience means." Emily nodded kindly. "It's okay. Sometimes, people need to see something to believe it." Later that evening, as the base quieted down, Emily sat on the shooting bench, the same place where she had practiced alone so many nights before. The metal glimmered under the soft light of the moon, but her eyes were fixed on her rifle. She ran her fingers gently over the scratches and worn edges. Every mark told a story, every dent was a memory. She remembered her father teaching her how to shoot when she was just a little girl. He had told her, "Guns may change, Emily, but what truly matters never does. Patience, focus, and heart." Those words had guided her through every challenge. While she sat there lost in thought, someone approached her. It was Sergeant Blake, the one who had been her toughest competitor. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She gestured for him to join her. He sat beside her, his face calm and thoughtful. "You know," he said with a small smile, "I've been shooting for 15 years, but I've never seen anyone handle a rifle like you did today." Emily chuckled softly. "Guess the old rifle still has some life left in it." He shook his head. "It's not just the rifle. It's the person behind it. You taught us all a big lesson today, not to judge so quickly." They sat in silence for a moment, the wind blowing gently through the trees. The sound of the crickets filled the air. After a while, Blake added, "You know, the higher-ups were talking. They might recommend you for the advanced sniper training program." Emily turned to him, surprised. "Me?" He nodded. "You earned it. They're looking for someone who can teach others what real discipline looks like." She didn't say anything for a moment, just smiled quietly. "If that's true, I'd be honored. Not because of the title, but because I'd get to help others learn what really matters." Blake nodded in agreement. "That's exactly why you deserve it." As the night deepened, Emily stayed there for a long time, looking at the stars. She thought about how quickly things had changed, from being laughed at to being celebrated. But what mattered most to her wasn't the medal or the recognition. It was the journey, the silence of early mornings at the range, the endless patience it took to aim perfectly, the faith in herself when no one else believed. She realized that true victory isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. The next morning, when she walked through the base, people greeted her with respect. Some saluted, others smiled. Even new recruits whispered about her, calling her the marksman with the old rifle. It became a story that spread quickly. A story about how a soldier's skill and heart could outshine even the most advanced weapon. During training sessions, many younger soldiers began approaching her for advice. "Sergeant Carter, can you teach us how to control our breathing?" Or, "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" She never refused anyone. She taught them what she had learned, that shooting wasn't about power or speed, but patience and understanding. She showed them that a rifle wasn't just a tool. It was a test of character. And slowly, the entire unit began to change. The laughter and arrogance were replaced by focus and discipline. Emily's quiet strength had inspired a new culture, one built on respect, not rivalry. That evening, as she cleaned her old rifle again, she whispered softly, "You and me, old friend, we did it." She smiled, not because of the victory, but because she knew she had turned doubt into inspiration. Her old rifle, once a symbol of mockery, had become a symbol of excellence. And she had proved something powerful. True skill doesn't shine because it's new. It shines because it's real. A few weeks passed since Emily Carter's legendary victory at the shooting competition. The story had spread far beyond her base. Soldiers from nearby divisions had heard about the woman with the old rifle who outshot everyone. Some called it luck, but most called it pure skill. Emily's name had become a quiet inspiration across the army. One morning, as the first light of dawn spread over the camp, Emily was called into the commander's office. The message was short. "Report to HQ at 0800 hours. She didn't know why, but her instincts told her it was something important. When she entered the commander's office, she stood at attention. The commander, Colonel Hayes, looked up from his desk and smiled slightly. "At ease, Sergeant Carter," he said. "You've made quite a name for yourself these past few weeks." "Thank you, sir," Emily replied calmly. Hayes leaned back in his chair. "You see, Carter, what you did wasn't just about shooting targets. You reminded this unit, and maybe the whole force, what discipline and focus really mean. That's rare these days." She didn't say anything, just nodded respectfully. Then the commander handed her a sealed folder. "You've been selected for an advanced sniper training program," he said. "Only a handful of soldiers get this chance. It's tough, brutal, and not everyone makes it through. But I believe you can." Emily's eyes widened slightly. She had heard about that program. It was one of the hardest in the military. "I'm honored, sir," she said softly. "You'll report in 2 days," Hayes continued. "They'll test everything. Your endurance, precision, and mental strength. It's not just about shooting. It's about surviving under pressure." She saluted and left the room, the folder held tightly in her hands. As she walked through the base, memories flooded back. The laughter, the competition, the victory. She realized this wasn't just another mission. This was a new beginning. That evening, she sat by her bunk, cleaning her old rifle again. Her fellow soldiers gathered around, curious. "So it's true?" one asked. "You're joining the sniper program?" Emily smiled faintly. "That's what they say." "You're going to crush it," said another. "If anyone can do it, it's you." She looked up, her eyes calm but focused. "It's not about crushing anything. It's about learning. Always learning." 2 days later, she arrived at the training site, a remote mountain camp, surrounded by forests and silence. The instructors were tough, the weather harsher, and the exercises intense. Each day began before sunrise and ended long after dark. The recruits were a mix of elite soldiers, men and women who had proven themselves in different parts of the world. Many were bigger, faster, and stronger than Emily. Some recognized her and whispered, "That's Carter, the one with the old rifle." The first test was brutal. They had to carry their rifles and gear across 10 kilometers of rough terrain, through mud, wind, and rain, while staying completely silent. Most recruits struggled. Emily didn't complain once. She just kept moving, step by step, her breathing steady, her mind calm. When they reached the first checkpoint, one of the instructors, a tall man with a rough voice, said, "Carter, I heard you're the miracle shot. Let's see if that old rifle can still perform." He set up a target on a distant hill, barely visible through the morning fog. 500 meters, he said. "One shot." Emily nodded. She lay down on the cold ground, adjusted her rifle, and took a deep breath. The wind was tricky, shifting slightly from the left. She waited, patient as ever, watching the leaves for movement. When the air went still, she pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet flew true. The spotter raised his binoculars, then turned toward the instructor. Direct hit. Center. A few soldiers gasped quietly. The instructor just stared for a moment, then said gruffly, "Not bad, Carter. Let's see how long you can keep that up." The days turned into weeks. The training tested every part of her body, her focus, her willpower. There were moments when exhaustion threatened to break her. During one night drill, she had to crawl through icy water and mud while keeping her rifle dry. Her hands were shaking, her muscles burning, but she never stopped. Some of the younger soldiers started looking up to her. "How do you stay so calm, even when it's this hard?" one asked during a short break. She smiled faintly. "You can't control the storm," she said. "You can only control how steady you stand in it." Her quiet determination inspired everyone. Even the instructors began to respect her deeply. They noticed how she never complained, never boasted, just focused, trained, and improved. One evening, after a long day of drills, the head instructor called everyone together. "Tomorrow," he announced, "you'll face the final test, the long-distance challenge, a 1,000-meter shot. You'll be judged on precision, patience, and timing. One mistake, and you're out. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat alone near the campfire, holding her rifle. The stars above were bright, the forest silent except for the sound of the wind. She thought of her father again, his lessons, his words. Patience and heart, Emily. That's what makes a true shooter. When morning came, she was ready. The recruits lined up on the rocky ridge. The targets were far away, tiny dots almost lost in the mist. One by one, soldiers took their shots. Many missed. Some hit close but not perfect. When Emily's turn came, the instructor gave her a long look. "You've surprised a lot of people, Carter," he said. "Let's see if you can surprise us one more time." She smiled faintly, lay down and steadied her old rifle. The wind whispered across the valley. She closed her eyes for a second, feeling the rhythm of her breathing. Then she opened them and pulled the trigger. Bang! The echo rolled across the mountains. Everyone waited. Then the spotter shouted, "Bullseye! Dead center!" The camp erupted in disbelief. The instructor grinned and said, "Well, looks like the old rifle wins again." Emily stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from her uniform. She didn't smile much, but her eyes shone with quiet pride. She had done it again, not for fame, not for recognition, but because she refused to give up on what she believed in. Later that day, the commander of the program shook her hand. "Welcome to the Elite Sniper Corps, Sergeant Carter. You've earned it." And as she looked out at the endless horizon, rifle in hand, she knew one thing for sure. The world had changed its view of her forever. The woman they once laughed at had now become a legend, the sharpshooter who proved that heart and skill can outshine any weapon. Months passed after Emily Carter completed the Elite Sniper Training Program. She was no longer just a skilled shooter. She was now one of the best snipers in the entire division. Her name carried quiet respect wherever she went. Soldiers didn't laugh when they saw her old rifle anymore. In fact, they treated it almost like a legend. Everyone knew the story. The woman who outshot the entire unit with an old rifle and a calm heart. But Emily wasn't after fame. She never cared for medals or attention. She only wanted to keep learning, keep growing, and serve her duty with honor. That was the kind of soldier she was. One chilly morning, Emily was called into a briefing room. The commander, Colonel Hayes, was waiting with several senior officers. The room was silent when she entered. The commander nodded for her to sit. "Sergeant Carter," he began, "we have an assignment that requires your precision and patience. This isn't a competition. It's a real operation." Emily straightened in her chair. "Yes, sir. What's the mission?" The commander placed a file on the table and opened it. "We've identified a group operating deep in the border region. They've been disrupting supply routes and ambushing our convoys. We need a team to go in quietly, gather intel, and if necessary, neutralize the threat. You'll be part of that team as the lead sniper." Emily felt a spark of pride mixed with responsibility. This was her first major mission as part of the Elite Sniper Corps. "Understood, sir," she replied. The commander nodded. "You'll move out in 48 hours. It's dangerous terrain, mountains, dense forest, unpredictable weather. But if there's anyone I trust with this, it's you." When she left the room, she found herself thinking about how far she had come. Just a few months ago, she had been laughed at for using an old rifle. Now, that same rifle was her greatest strength. The next 2 days were spent in preparation. Emily checked her rifle carefully, cleaning every part, making sure it was in perfect working condition. She packed only what she needed: ammunition, rations, a field scope, and a few personal items, including a small photograph of her father, tucked safely into her jacket pocket. On the day of departure, her team gathered near the transport truck. There were 5 of them in total, 2 scouts, 1 radio operator, 1 medic, and Emily as the sniper. The team leader, Captain Mason, approached her. "You're the sharpshooter everyone's talking about, huh?" he said with a friendly smile. Emily smiled back. "I just do my job, sir." "Good," he said, nodding. "Because out there, we'll need every bit of your calm and accuracy." The journey to the mission site was long and rough. The roads turned into muddy trails, and eventually they had to continue on foot. The air was cold and thin, and the forest around them was thick and silent. Every step had to be careful, every sound mattered. For days, they moved quietly through the terrain, gathering information and avoiding detection. Emily's sharp eyes spotted details others missed. A trail of footprints, a piece of cloth caught in a branch, a faint reflection of metal far off in the distance. Her calm nature and focus helped the team stay composed, even when the conditions became harsh. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they finally spotted the enemy camp from a high ridge. Through her scope, Emily could see a group of armed men moving around. The camp was well guarded, with lookouts posted at different points. Captain Mason whispered, "We'll wait until dark, then we move in closer." As night fell, the team crept forward silently. Every movement was planned, every sound avoided. Emily stayed slightly behind, finding a good vantage point with a clear line of sight. The moonlight glimmered faintly on her old rifle. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence. The crunch of a branch. One of the scouts had stepped on it by accident. A shout came from the camp below. Lights flickered on. The enemy had noticed something. "Positions!" Captain Mason whispered urgently. The team spread out, taking cover. Emily's heart beat steady. She lifted her rifle and looked through the scope. She could see movement, figures with flashlights and guns searching the forest. The tension was high, but Emily's breathing stayed calm and measured. "Carter," the captain whispered through the radio. "You have visual?" "Affirmative," she replied softly. "Take out the lookout tower first." She adjusted her aim slightly, focusing on the silhouette of the lookout at the top of the tower. The man was scanning the area with binoculars, unaware of what was about to happen. Emily exhaled slowly. Bang! The shot echoed softly through the forest. The man dropped instantly. "Target down," she whispered. That one shot changed everything. The enemy camp erupted into confusion. The team moved swiftly, using the distraction to their advantage. Emily continued to provide cover, hitting targets with precise, calculated shots. Every bullet found its mark. Under her protection, the team was able to reach the camp, collect the intel they needed, and retreat before reinforcements arrived. It was a perfect execution, fast, silent, and efficient. When they returned to base days later, exhausted but successful, the commander was waiting for them. "Excellent work," he said, shaking Mason's hand. Then he turned to Emily. "And you, those shots were flawless. You saved your team." Emily saluted. "Just doing my duty, sir." The commander smiled. "That old rifle of yours is becoming famous, Sergeant." She smiled faintly. "It's not the rifle, sir. It's the trust between us." The room fell quiet for a moment. Everyone knew what she meant. Her words carried more weight than a long speech could. After the mission, Emily's story spread even further. Young soldiers often came up to her asking to train with her, to learn how she stayed calm under pressure. She always told them the same thing: don't chase perfection, chase patience. The rest will follow. Her legend grew, not as someone who bragged about victories, but as a symbol of humility, focus, and courage. Late one night, she sat alone again by her rifle, the metal from the old competition glinting faintly beside her. She thought about her father, about the laughter that once followed her, about how far she had come. The camp was quiet, the stars bright above her. She whispered softly, "You were right, Dad. It's never about the weapon. It's about the heart behind it." And as the wind rustled through the trees, Emily smiled to herself. The world had changed around her, but she remained the same, calm, strong, and humble. The woman they once mocked had become a living legend, the soldier who proved that courage, patience, and heart can turn even the oldest weapon into the most powerful force on earth.